States because if you look at the detail of this missile, it does appear, at least to me, that this was also a veiled warning to the United States. And that's because, according to the official Chinese media, the missile that was fired from a submarine was likely to have been the JL-3. Now, that is, as I said, a submarine-launched missile. And the point is that this missile could reach the continental United States from Chinese coastal waters, according to the Pentagon. So,
欢迎来到胤蓝智库。今天我们把两件看似不搭界的事情放在一起聊，一边是欧洲老百姓顶着极端高温疯狂抢购中国的空调，另一边是中国向太平洋试射了一枚搭载模拟弹头的洲际导弹。消费品贸易和大国重器在这个夏天产生了奇妙的交汇。这两件事的大背景非常有意思。先看欧洲，今年热浪席卷，欧洲政客们天天喊着要解决对华巨额贸易逆差，搞所谓的去风险，但老百姓的身体很诚实，短短几个月，中国制冷设备的进口量直接暴涨。与此同时，在太平洋那边，澳大利亚和斐济刚签完防务协议，拉起一个排他性的小圈子。紧接着，中国这枚疑似巨浪3的潜射导弹就破水而出。五角大楼一看数据，它的射程已经足以从中国近海覆盖美国本土。面对这种局面，今天这期访谈里的两位西方学者把话说得很透。学者直接指出，在绝对的成本和技术优势面前，欧洲工业正面临被实质性的掏空的危机。而太平洋上的这枚导弹，其实是中国向华盛顿及其盟友释放的明确警告信号，切勿轻举妄动。另一位学者爱丽丝则认为，中国这是在展示一种高明而克制的平衡战略。在经济高度绑定的今天，如果核心区域爆发危机，手握稀土和完整产业链的中国，会让跟进制裁的欧洲付出多大的代价呢？西方政客的算盘和现实到底差距了多远？咱们直接进正片，拆解大国博弈的几层逻辑。
That this missile could reach the continental United States from Chinese coastal waters, according to the Pentagon. So, although we're talking about a missile that was launched into the Pacific and it had a dummy warhead, not a real warhead, we can see that in terms of signaling, this is basically saying to the West, to the United States, and certainly to Australia, Fiji, and anyone else who cares to watch, it's saying, don't mess with us. We are a growing and increasingly assertive military power. And for that reason, I think that the context around this is also key. China has been launching many, many more combined military exercises with different countries. In fact, more than 45 partner countries in the decade that ended in 2025. It's conducted more than 154 of these combined exercises, and mostly with Russia. And the scope of the exercises has also increased. It's done exercises in the Pacific, Indian Ocean, and around Africa. And it's had extensive voyages, naval voyages, this is, around Australia. So to me, this is part of the same picture, this missile test into the sea somewhere in the Pacific. Obviously, it's part of another big picture, which is China's very rapid expansion of its missile arsenal. China is supposed to have, we think, estimates say, around 500 ballistic missiles currently. But by 2035, it is projected to have about 1,500 nuclear warheads, which could be delivered on ballistic missiles by that time. So this is part of a much bigger picture. It's part of the rise of an assertive China. And, to flip that to the trade domain, we've got another side of an assertive China emerging, and it's showing in China's trade surplus with Europe that is really hitting the big time this year. Last year, it was 360 billion euro, and this year, the estimate is that it will top 400 billion euro. So I don't know what you think of it, of the trade side of things, or maybe if you want to talk about ballistic missiles, Alice, but on the trade side of things, you came in talking about these air conditioners. This is just one example of the way that Europe seems to be ineluctably drawn to importing Chinese stuff. And I suppose that's because Chinese stuff is so much cheaper. It's often better in terms of technology than what the Europeans can produce. But structurally, it seems to me sitting here in Europe that Europe is really very weak when it comes to industrial production and producing things that Europeans can buy. And that's simply why, whether it's a heat wave causing us to import air conditioners, or in the middle of winter, if there's a cold snap, we'll be importing Chinese heat pumps, I'm sure of it. It just seems that these days we turn to China for all of our needs. What do you make of it, Alice?
Yeah, I know that on the surface, these two stories don't look too interlinked, but hopefully we can convince people that they somewhat are, right? Because on the one hand, you see China that is worried about the geopolitical situation. I think that exercise is more of a deterrent strategy than an offensive, saber-rattling one. It's to show, hey, we have long-range missiles with capabilities to reach Australia, to reach the US, and, don't mess with us in a period where we've seen a lot of geopolitical uncertainty and uncertainty that's increasing. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Fiji and Australia signed that mutual defense treaty. China has been engaged in an influence campaign with the Pacific Island countries, and my counterparts in Australia have been worried about that. The amount of Chinese investment that's gone into, say, a Fiji, which was the first Pacific Island country to diplomatically recognize China, by the way, but also the telecommunications and infrastructure development that is almost completely Chinese at this point in a lot of these countries, including Fiji. So I think that there is one side, which is from China's vantage point, we want to maintain influence in the Pacific. We also want to deter any kind of coalition building or offensive coming from the Quad or coming from the US by showing that we have these ballistic missile technologies and capabilities. On the one hand, it's trying to strategically deter. On the other hand, it is showing that it is still very much embedded in the multilateral trade system. The numbers that you just cited in terms of the trade deficit that Europe is running with China, now almost close to 400, it could be this year, billion euros of trade deficit between EU and China. The EU is 15% of Chinese exports in terms of market destination. It's a huge market for Chinese manufacturers. So China is still heavily dependent. We've spoken previously on this export engine. Net exports are 30% of total GDP growth. In a way, I think they're kind of playing this balancing act of being tough on the geopolitical issues, but really still, I would argue, somewhat vulnerable on the trade issues. But the big question here is, why isn't Europe doing more? Because I think that they have some leverage to bear, given what I've just noted, China's trade dependencies and its total, macro machine, but it's also a dependency on Europe as a huge market. So all I can point to is the structural fragmentation in Europe as this supranational body to try to get its act together and put in legislation that is smart in terms of, maybe price minimums on Chinese exports, limitations on the amount of exports that come into certain markets, getting smart about IP development being based in Europe and not just assembled in Europe. But the big question, and here I defer to you, James, as the expert, is why isn't Europe doing more? Because I think it could have a lot of leverage.
That is absolutely the key question, Alice. I do note that the EU and China recently released a rare joint statement that aims at balancing trade and addressing market access issues. And the two sides said that they would set up a bilateral working group to monitor trade flows. Beijing offered reassurances that existing rare earths and permanent magnet export controls will not disrupt EU supply chain. So that's the official sort of picture. But to be honest with you, I sort of, my feelings on this are similar to what you just described, Alice. I feel that Europe is fatally disunited on this issue. They cannot get consensus among the member states of the European Union to actually impose stiff tariffs or other forms of restrictions on Chinese imports, and they don't seem to have the political clout to push European exports to China either. And so the reason why this is important is that we're not just talking about trade balances here. We are talking about the end game for European industry. Europe stands to lose its industrial base. And I don't make any apology for speaking in such blatant and blunt terms. It really is that simple. The reason is that China has overtaken Europe when it comes to technological advancement, and the technology products that China's producing are way cheaper than the nearest competitors in Europe. That's why we've seen this flood of high-tech products. Everybody knows about the EVs that the Europeans are buying from China, but it's happening in almost every sector. And this is why we are in a very important moment. It seems to me that Europe has not yet imbibed the necessary sense of crisis that attends this situation. And while it doesn't, while it remains fairly flabby, sort of talking around the issues like Europe always seems to do, without coming out with strong, staunch action, it is presiding over the, I won't say extinction of its industrial base, but certainly the weakening and erosion of its industrial base, which is going to take decades to build up again if it loses it. So this is a vitally important, and as I said at the top, it's a geopolitical question. Therefore, I think it does belong with the story about the ballistic missile landing in the middle of the Pacific.
Yeah, because in the question which we've discussed in previous episodes of this Taiwan crisis risk and what will be the corollaries or outcomes or responses from some of these other countries, whether it's the US, we've talked about Japan and Korea, Australia in the past. But another question is, what is the EU going to do, right? Because China is a huge obviously market, but it's also a big exporter of a lot of goods that the Europeans require. We haven't discussed rare earths yet, but that's another choke point that the Chinese have over the Europeans that they have not yet weaponized, but they have with the Japanese. The big question for the Europeans will be, what will you do when there is a Taiwan crisis? If there's an invasion, a blockade, or a quarantine, will you put economic, financial, technological sanctions on China, and then will China react in kind? And here I think Europe could be quite vulnerable to a China counter response, which is, I'd imagine, something in the vein of we'll cut off exports of critical technologies and rare earth commodities. I can imagine that would be hugely disruptive for the Europeans. Oh, and we'll also import less agricultural products and chemicals products from the Europeans. Again, very, very disruptive for European business.
Yep, I fear that you're right there too, Alice. I think China's got so much coercive power that it could use. It is easy to imagine a scenario under which China does something that Europe doesn't like, and then China threatens to use these coercive powers and Europe backs off. I think that's also highly possible.
欢迎回到胤蓝智库。看完这段访谈，不知道大家有没有发现，这两位学者其实揭开了西方目前最不愿意面对的一个现实，那就是在极端的地缘环境下，他们对中国有着不对称的依赖。大家千万别把欧洲买空调单纯看作是天气热，就像访谈里推演的那样，如果未来地缘危机爆发， 欧洲敢不敢跟着美国制裁中国？答案是非常悲观的，因为中国手里拿捏的不只是空调，还扼守稀土、关键矿产和新能源产业链的咽喉。一旦中国实施反制，欧洲失去的绝对不仅仅是冷气，而是整个高端的制造业面临停摆的深渊。这就回到了我们开头的那个问题，买空调和试射导弹到底是有什么内在联系呢？咱们把时间倒回1840年，当时的清朝对欧洲有同样的庞大贸易顺差，赚走了全世界的白银，但由于没有强大的国防实力做后盾，这些财富最终引来的是坚船利炮，没有武力背书的贸易顺差，就像沙滩上的城堡，一推就倒。到了2026年的今天，我们在商业和科技上碾压竞争对手的同时，太平洋上的那声巨响，就是在向全世界传递了一个清晰的信号：我们不仅有深度参与全球贸易的诚意和底气，更有保卫这些经济成果的战略威慑力。真正的实力才是捍卫和平与自由贸易的压舱石。大家觉得，在全球供应链加速重塑的今天，欧洲还能保住自己的工业底子吗？欢迎在评论区留下你的理性思考。这里是胤蓝智库，我们下期见。